So genomics is the next trillion-dollar industry. We're seeing the most investment, at least from Beckman's perspective, in the chemistries and the platforms and the tools that are used by scientists in the industry itself. And so what I mean is that those tools, we're investing in things like better chemistries for more consistency, better platforms and tools that are more robust and more reliable.
So where we see the most investment in genomics would be in the area of clinical diagnostics and also pharma. So as far as including genomics data into clinical trials, and with clinical diagnostics would be like liquid biopsies or gene editing.
Genomics is the next billion-dollar industry, and we clearly see that at OnRamp. It's, according to JP Morgan, it's a $48 billion industry by 2019. And the greatest areas of investment in this market have come into the instruments and the sequencing machines, and that's really dominated the investments over the last decade. That said, while this has been hugely successful and has enabled the proliferation of sequencing and genomics technology into many, many markets, it has introduced a whole slew of new challenges by placing these machines with institutions and in front of individuals that have no idea what to do with the data in order to work with those systems. So major investments have gone into data generation, which has now opened up a challenge for the industry for investments into data analysis.
So the next area is a big investment we anticipate will be in diagnostics, in next-gen sequencing, in synthetics. And so we anticipate the market just booming in those areas and going towards the diagnostic market.
So to take things further, I think the trend we're seeing now is a real focus on getting more genetic information out of each and every sample. So that goes hand in hand with driving down costs as well. But we're seeing a real trend in being able to get, say, RNA and DNA, transcriptome and whole genome information from the same exact sample, and ultimately building a much bigger, more holistic picture of what's going on with that sample.
So while NGS has been the driving force in the clinical genomics field, I believe that it's insurance coverage that is going to just take it one step further. While the hardware is there and the software is also there, insurance companies are still only covering specific gene-based panel tests, not covering whole genomes and whole exomes. So to fully explore and embrace the full potential of genomics, we need to be looking at more of the genome and exome and not so much in the gene-targeted approach.
Clearly, next-generation sequencing has been the driving force of the genomics industry over the last 2 decades. It's with incredible advances dropping the costs precipitously and driving much faster speeds. It's been 4 times faster than Moore's Law. It definitely has been a major force in driving genomics. That said, looking forward, what's really going to be driving the overall genomics industry is how we use the data that's generated by the sequencers. And that involves collaboration, that involves unification across different knowledge bases, but ultimately it involves putting better tools into the hands of the biologists and researchers that need to utilize the data being generated by the sequencers globally. That's what's really going to drive future investment.
So the keys to clinical adoption and mainstreaming in genomics would be, one, education. So while we may have the technology, the software and the hardware to interpret the genomic data and communicate and share that data back with the patient, the physicians, the nurses and the physician assistants are the ones who are supposed to know what to do with the data or what to order. So education and their medical training or like during residency is key to do that, to have to put genomic interpretation into medical.
For us to get clinical adoption of genomics, we need more education of the healthcare professionals, the clinicians, and consumers. If they simply don't know what they can and can't get done with genomics or a genetic test, they're not going to prescribe it, consumers won't put pressure on the insurance companies for reimbursement and to be able to utilize those in care, nor will the clinicians be looking for them or incorporate them into patient care. So education needs to be driven at both levels. For mainstream adoption of genomics into clinical care more broadly, what we really need to see beyond education is empowering the biologists and researchers with the tools to be able to utilize the information produced in genomics. Whether that's from next generation sequencing, from microarray, or even mass spec with proteomics, we need to be able to put it all together and empower the tools to be able to, the researchers and biologists with the tools to find the insights.
Okay, so I think the next step is for better understanding between doctors and the general public. I think most of the scientists understand the benefits of where we can go with this, but I think the biggest barrier currently right now is how the general public doesn't understand where this current field can go.
So genomics could leverage effectively the expertise in the tech industry, in my opinion. So the tech industry is very popular for adapting, or it's very good at adapting at a fast-paced, fast-changing world. And as far as healthcare, I think we could learn a bit more from that, at adapting new technologies better, faster, still doing good science, but adapting those things faster, best practices to deliver better results to patients.
The genomics industry needs to leverage expertise, obviously beyond the bounds of the biology and life sciences. The first one that everyone thinks of is IT, in terms of the scalability, the infrastructure that's available. But I think we need to look far deeper than that. There's expertise in streamlining the software and the systems that make it more intuitive. There's expertise in scalable infrastructure. We need to look to not only cloud computing as a basis of getting infrastructure for scalable genomics, but more importantly, we need to look deeply at what Facebook, Google, Apple, others have done in optimizing their own internal infrastructure, not just the IT, but also the software, the way they're storing their data, the databases, and the way they are leveraging all of those to make social media possible. That same foundation is critically important for the scale of data that we have coming and the relationships and insights we need to generate in that data. Some of it needs to be deeply stored, some of it needs to be actively harvested, but in all cases we need to be able to bring together that hardware infrastructure at scale, that software ease of use, that social media networking, and involve that on a massive scale for the hundreds of millions that need to be involved in genomics.
Okay, so going back to the previous question and answer, I think understanding the value of genomics in the medical field, the understanding of patients and doctors knowing how this technology can be used to further development, I think is the next step in leveraging.
I think it's a really exciting time right now to be in the genomics field. I think there's innovation happening almost on a weekly basis. In the next 5 years, I think what's really going to drive progression of the field, and what I'm most excited about, are a lot of the consistencies and improvements made in the chemistries, the platforms and the tools themselves. Increasing reliability, increasing throughput, allowing the cost to be driven down in such a way to make genomics really a realistic part of patient care.
So the one thing that I'd love to see in genomics happen in the next 5 years is bringing this sort of technologies, new technologies in genomics into markets such as South America or Africa. So right now there are a lot of countrywide initiatives happening in the US, in Europe, in Asia, but I think that developing countries would benefit from this a ton. It's where some of the most challenges are, and I'd love to see that happen in the next 5 years.
In the next 5 years, I would most like to see in genomics the empowerment of our researchers and biologists to be able to analyze their own darn data. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see them utilize intuitive, easy-to-use platforms and to unblock the bottlenecks to where all the amazing data generation systems from Illumina and others could be fully maxed out in their capability, and we could generate insights into new diseases, develop new drugs, find new cures, and really improve the quality of human life.
Okay, so the next thing I could see in genomics is the decrease in time needed for sequencing to get to the clinical field, as well as the cost. I think there's been promises made in the past to get it under $100 to sequence a whole genome. I think if we get it down even further, make it more publicly available, make it cheaper, it'll be a great benefit to all of us.
So I'd say so Congenica has identified the fact that by 2030, the aging population in Asia is going to be a big market. There's going to be a lot of growth. So we have developed key partnerships, business partnerships in Asia. How we see this changing the genomics market is that being the aging population in that sector, the natural causes of death, being heart disease and cancer, have genetic components in them. So hopefully by 2030, because we are going to do a lot of advances in rare disease discovery, that is going to it's going to help us leverage how to diagnose those sort of like complex diseases in that sort of aging population.
With more than half the aging elderly population in Asia, by 2030, the genomics market needs to recognize that we are a global community. We need our databases, we need our insights and our collaboration to reflect that, and to enable those insights and the economics of those insights and the availability of those insights to reach far facets of the globe.
So I see Asia being a growing field in therapeutics as well as research. We've already seen a number of pharmaceuticals move over there. Some of them have left, but I think as 2030 comes around and we see an elderly population growing there in Asia, you see a bigger need for clinical diagnostics and etc. And so hopefully you'll see a bigger boom in investments and amount of revenue coming in to help the industry grow.